advice that you're going to give them?
To
A friend, just let's say a friend tells them, I'm sorry.
jury duty?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean like trying to get out of it?
No, well, I mean, maybe. But if you had to give them some advice,
No,
they said.
just to be honest about what they say, because we're going to be judged about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello and welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala. That was defense attorney and public defender Maria Dunker. She is representing Erin Robinson in this case. She had a very folksy way about her and asked some interesting questions to the jury during voir dire. And we were very privileged and very lucky to be able to bring you voir dire. Not always can we do that. So today you were able to see the actual jury picked. And we have a wonderful guest right now to help us sort of pick through all of what went on today. Joining us now is trial attorney and jury consultant Ross Suter. Also with us is Gabriel Sepulveda Sanchez. He's a trial attorney in Stockton, California. So gentlemen, again, thank you very much for being with us. I want to start with you, Ross, because again, today was all about jury selection and the sort of the way the two sides went about it. I thought there was a stark contrast there. I saw a very sort of straightforward way by the prosecutor, Justin Diaz. He was sticking to the law, making sure they understood the law, because I think a lot of his case is going to revolve around understanding the law, whereas the defense was trying to sort of get a feel for these jurors, see where they're coming from, what their ideas and thoughts were about a number of things which may affect the outcome of this case. So let me ask you, in a case like this, what should she be looking for as a defense attorney with a self-defense case? What kind of jury should she be looking for?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me, Michael. It really was an interesting to be able to watch this unfold, and quite impressive that the court was able to get, a jury of 12 with two alternates in a day, particularly in the COVID situation. What the defense counsel definitely was looking for was just some attitudes and beliefs. She was trying to get to know the jurors. And really, while we call it jury selection, we in the industry on our side, what we do as consultants, we are looking to deselect jurors. We're looking to get rid of people that are not going to be able to, for whatever reason, because of their attitudes, their beliefs, their life experiences, are not going to be able to, understand where, Mr. Robinson was coming from or what his story is. So, she's really much delving into that and trying to get to know these jurors and really build a rapport yet at the same time. Definitely in stark contrast, she was more open-ended in her questions, which allowed the jurors to tell a little bit more about themselves. They weren't confined to a question which was yes or no. And obviously, listening to what everyone was saying earlier, it's really, prosecution's going to have to get over this legal hurdle. They wanted to make sure people were able to wrap their heads around that as well and be able to, get past that battery argument that they're going to be making so they can move on to the next step and have that felony murder charge.
Gabriel, as we sort of get through this jury selection process, it becomes clear that both sides might be looking for something a little different. Turns out, what I'm understanding, there's 7 women on the jury. Now, how do you feel about that? We talked a little earlier that we might want folks on there who maybe have a little history of having a few scuffles here and there or understand that lifestyle, and perhaps getting 7 women on the jury kind of flies in the face of that. What is your sense of having 7 women and 5 men on this jury?
I mean, I would rather have more men. I think I think men would more be able to relate to these types of situations where you're going to have to defend, where something like that could happen. You have to choose how you're going to react to that situation. That's a good point. That's a very good point. But also, women have been subject to unwanted sexual advances or unwanted sexual comments too, so they may be able to help the defense out too. So that's really a interesting point to have 7 female jurors and the rest of them are male. I would tend to think that I would rather have more males because I think men and throughout our lives have probably come across maybe these situations before. But that's very interesting. I think for me, I would really just want to get to understand their background, where they've come from, have they dealt with these situations before? Try to somewhat bring that up into the voir dire situation if you can. So we're talking, what do you think about, how do you feel about self-defense? How do you feel about self-defense on someone else's property? Those are the questions I would really try to emphasize in the situation that I think is the most important.
Ross, age is going to play a big part in this case. My understanding is that the jury is a lot of middle-aged folks on the jury. Do you think that's a good direction to go? Because again, you have a defendant who was 19 at the time. You have a victim who was 55. There's a big age differential there. How should they approach that whole point, that there's such a large differential between the defendant and the victim in this case?
I think having a middle-aged also. I'm sorry, did I interrupt you? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. Please go ahead.
No, I was Gabriel. I'll get to you in a sec. I was throwing that out to Ross to give me his impressions. I'll come back to you on that as well.
No problem.
Go ahead, Ross.
Yes, sure thing. So, my thoughts on it, really, we need to be careful getting into the stereotypes too much, just based upon looking at somebody on paper. And we really want to get as much information about them and what they bring to the table. Life history, like you were talking about earlier, Michael, people that had some type of experience, in the streets or whatever it is it might be, they could be male or female. It could be of any different age. I'd be really interested in seeing who was showing up for jury duty and who they had to select from in the idea of our older individuals not coming because they're a little bit more fearful of the pandemic, or even minorities, or whoever it may be. So it's hard to say just looking at people at on paper that somebody's going to be good or bad. We want to do a little bit deeper of a dive into what makes them tick and who they are, and what makes them who they are going to be. It is interesting now when you see the defendant and he doesn't look like a 19-year-old kid. So how do we, how are they going to weave a story and get them back in time? Because it has been so long since the date of this event and the trial.
Yeah, this particular case is the first trial coming up in this courthouse in quite a while, of course, because of the COVID issues. They have a number of COVID protocols in place. I want to play a quick soundbite, then you get you guys' reaction to it, where a potential juror, questions why Erin Robinson, who's a defendant in this case, is wearing a mask instead of a face shield. As you notice, the judge and the attorneys were all wearing face shields. Actually, the jurors were wearing face shields as well, so that the attorneys could get a sense of their facial reactions to the questions, etc. But the defendant initially was wearing a mask. So let's take a listen.
No problem, but I do have something that's been bothering me since we sat down.
Okay.
Obviously, these shields are important so you can read everybody's facial expressions. Does he have to wear a shield so we can read his expressions during the trial?
All right, that's a question I'm going to leave for the judge, okay? That's not a question that's appropriate for me, but if the judge wants to answer it, I'll let her answer.
I'm going to ask you to have a conversation with your client,
I have no problem with that, Judge.
and
My
based
fault.
on that question that's been asked.
That's
So
my fault. I take responsibility for that. I'll take care of it.
So actually, I'm going to start with Mr. Juror number 11. How are you today? Good. And I wanted to thank you actually for pointing out about Mr. Robinson not wearing a face shield today. And I wanted to let you know that was my fault, not his. I instructed him to wear his face mask today. It was our intention for him to wear a shield tomorrow, but I heard you loud and clear, so we've corrected that issue. So the first thing I want to know, are you going to hold that against Mr. Robinson that I made a mistake this morning?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I just feel like, we have to show our face and you should show his too.
I completely understand and wanted to thank you again for pointing that out. So.
Yeah, I thought that was handled very well by Maria Dunker there, making sure that she took responsibility, that the defendant was not trying to be evasive or do anything, surreptitious by wearing a mask. So, Ross, let me ask you, this is a time of COVID. Trials are going to look different. Things are going to be different. Do you approach things differently as a result of some of the precautions and protocols we're seeing in place now in courtrooms?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that was a lesson right there. Jurors are going to want to have a certain degree or a sense of fairness. If I have to wear a shield, why does he get to wear a mask? Plus, we want to read the jurors, or at least the veneer panelists, what their reactions are. And the jurors want the same thing. They want to be able to read everybody else's face as well. I thought the defense counsel did an excellent job of just attacking that and just making sure that it wasn't left out there and that question was answered, and that, we can poll the jurors and make sure nobody else has a problem with that and is going to hold it against them. So, we're probably going to trip up on some other things over time, and it's actually, I would be thankful to the juror that they brought it up and they actually talked about that rather than had it in the back of their head, did not express that, and now we find out later that they were, angered or annoyed or whatever to a certain degree because he had a mask and they had a shield.
Yeah, excellent point. And Gabriel, let me ask you, as a defense attorney, trial attorney, I know I've been singing from the highest mountain that, these protocols that are in place as a defense attorney would really bother me. They would make my job a lot more difficult. I want to get your opinion about some of these protocols: the social distancing, the face masks, the shields over the face, the inability as a defense attorney to sort of pat your defendant on the back if you needed to, or to consult with him closely, humanize him in that way consistently in the eyes of the jury. How would that affect the way you go about your business, and is it something that would make your life more difficult?
Yeah, I think I'm more concerned about. I don't think people don't want to do jury service, jury duty as it is already, and now we're doing this in the midst of a pandemic. I think it's very tough for criminal defense attorneys out there right now to, persuade a jury. I think there's a little bit more of a burden on them because of that situation. I don't think people don't want to be in court to begin with, and now we're forcing them to come in. So I think for me, that's what I'm more concerned about, doing a jury trial when really people don't want to be there right now. As far as the mask situation goes, I think I like how the defense attorney handled that. She addressed it very quickly. Said, hey, that's my fault. Don't take that against my client. Are you going to be able to be impartial? And they dealt with that. So I do like how she handled that. But I do agree. I think the clear face shield's a lot better, so they're able to see that what his expressions are and that he's not hiding anything. I think the most important part is not to portray to the jury that you're hiding something, or you're hiding your defendant. So be transparent, humanize them as much as possible. But I think for me right now, I do not want to try cases during this time until we get some sort of order back into the court system, if we can get to that point.
Yeah, the order is going to look a lot like this for a while. I think this is probably the new normal, Ross. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, considering the fact this is a new normal, one of the things that I think, one of the effects that might be hidden is who shows up for jury duty. The judge early on this morning mentioned that maybe 1 in 4 actually show up. But I think with COVID concerns, that's probably going to 1 in 8, maybe 1 in 10. I mean, of course, it's too early to know or have studies nationwide about how that's playing out. But how does that affect the way you as a jury consultant wants to work through how to pick a jury when the folks who are showing up are even more either not concerned about COVID, or people who are concerned are staying home?
100%. We've been running some studies over the last several months and looking at various different aspects of how COVID is impacting people. And you can definitely see differences with people that are willing to show up. Some of it is political by the parties. Some of it is age related. Some of it is gender. There's certain groups that have been disproportionately impacted by COVID and are less likely to want to put themselves in the situation. So it is interesting how people are showing up, and a little bit of what I was talking about earlier. We have 7 women, 7 men. I'd be interested in the whole panel, who was showing up, and you're able to look at who they had to choose from, and was there any differences in comparison to the way it was pre-COVID. So, we're definitely going to see some changes. It is our impression and our feeling. And, you're going to have people coming up and having objections and saying, I don't feel comfortable. I don't want to do this. I thought the judge actually did an excellent job of addressing those issues and talking to people. And our experience has been to see there's been steps and people have been weeded out before they actually make it to the attorneys and actually go through this whole voir dire process.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think Judge Samantha Ward has done a fantastic job. She's connecting with jurors, keeping them informed, and working through this entire day. I thought she was very impressive, and that bodes well for the trial. All right, guys, I want you to stand by for a second. We're going to take a quick break right now. When we come back, we're going to continue to discuss the case of Florida v. Erin Robinson, the jealous lover murder trial, right here on Court TV. Stay with us. Hello and welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala. We are bringing you gavel-to-gavel coverage of the jealous lover murder trial in Florida, and that's Florida versus Erin Robinson. Now, Court TV crime and justice reporter Julia Janae has more on what this case is all about.
At this Zoom court hearing, a last chance for Erin Robinson to make a deal.
Has an offer been conveyed to him?
The committee authorized me to offer Mr. Robinson 15 years Florida State Prison if he wanted to plead to the manslaughter.
If Robinson decides to take prosecutor's offer, it will mean certain prison time.
I again reiterated to Mr. Robinson that if he wanted to plead and take the 15 years, he could do so.
Robinson is accused of killing Raul Ortiz after confronting him at his home in Wimauma, Florida. Investigators say Robinson was angry about the way Ortiz flirted with his girlfriend. She complained that Ortiz made inappropriate remarks while at a neighborhood Circle K convenience store. The first police reports of the incident say Robinson hit Ortiz 3 times in the face, and according to the criminal affidavit, the victim fell to the ground. The defendant grabbed the victim's head and struck it multiple times against concrete landscaping rocks. But that version of events is being disputed by the defense. In a pretrial hearing, Robinson admitted to hitting Ortiz, but says the 55-year-old threw the first punch. Ortiz was taken to the hospital for treatment, showing no signs of brain activity. He never regained consciousness and died a few days later.
Our proposal to Mr. Diaz was 5 years in the Florida State Prison on the charge of manslaughter.
I had discussed with Ms. Dunker that if her client was somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 or 20 years, we could certainly rediscuss it, but my understanding is he's not interested.
The consequences of not taking the offer by the state attorney's office, Robinson could face the more serious charge of first-degree felony murder. If convicted, he faces a potential sentence of life in prison without parole. The judge wants to hear it from Robinson.
And is it your position that you do not want to relay to the state any offer that includes a sentence of Florida State Prison and 15 years or above? Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And there's no further negotiation that you want Ms. Dunker to engage in with the state. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Any questions about that?
No, ma'am.
While the defendant could not convince prosecutors he acted in self-defense, he's hoping a jury will see it his way and acquit him of murder.
Quite a gamble being taken there by Mr. Erin Robinson, but our coverage of Florida versus Erin Robinson will begin as court begins at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. My colleague Vinnie Politan will be here with all the legal headlines of the day at 8 p.m. Eastern with Court TV Live. And up next, stay tuned for Deep Undercover. I'm Michael Ayala. Thank you so much for being with me this afternoon. And